Welcome to this first afternoon session. My name is Maren. I'm going to introduce you to very interesting 60-minute talks, and we start with the first one. We have Dr. Elise Jordan, Head of Research, Engagement and Learning at Lamar University in Texas, presenting together with Shelby Rodriguez, who is a multimedia journalist, also currently serving at Lamar University. And they are going to present for us on collaborative learning communities on social media platforms, creating a space for learning and research. So very warm welcome and looking forward to your talk. The stage is yours. I'm going to sit over there.
Hello, I'm Dr. Elise Jordan, Head of Research Engagement and Learning at Lamar University.
And I'm Shelby Rodriguez. I oversee public affairs at Lamar University and also serving as PIO. And I formerly oversaw social media and digital advertising, which is where this comes in.
At the time you put this presentation in, that's what she was doing, and she got a promotion in the meantime.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
No, it's fine.
So what I want to start off with is just a very light icebreaker, just to ask people in general. I'm from the South, so I always wonder, do you like pie or cake? And so those of you who are online, I think it's about 7, you can throw it into the chat and let Susie know. Pie or cake? Raise your hand for pie. 2 for pie. Okay, 3 for pie. Then cake. And then we have about 6, and then we have a person who's neutral. All right. So what we're going to do is start off, and we're going to break this up into about 3 different parts. So you're going to hear from me first, and I'm going to talk about research and teaching in social media. Then we're going to switch it over to Shelby, and she's going to talk about uses and types of social media. And then we're going to come back together, and we're going to do a discussion and let you talk a little bit to us. We're going to ask questions. You're going to tell us what you think, and then you get a chance to ask us some questions. All right. So for today, we're going to focus on social media and higher education, research of social media and higher education, uses of social media in higher education, and types of social media platforms. So we're talking all social media today. So you're going to still go with my father?
Yeah, I'm right. I'm good right there.
So this is the part where there was a previous presentation on social media. And what I just want to say, this is sort of like a follow-up to that, because they talked about social media and advocacy. And so ours is a little bit different, where we talk about the research aspect, teaching, and then she delves into her part of it. So social media to teach advocacy by doctors Sabrina Jackson, Angela Bullock, and Dr. Alvin Colvin. And I just want to give a shout out to their presentation. It's really good. Dr. Alex Colvin.
You said Alan.
Oh, I had lunch. I have no excuse. You don't have to go sit down if you want to mess with me. All right, so we're going to talk about social media spaces for active learning. And that's what the social media, what I've learned from reading some of the research, is really to engage the student. That's where we're going with this. So social media has the potential of being a space for active learning, whether used as formal or informal tool for social media to promote student engagement, collaboration, students and professor interaction. And we have Doherty and Anderson of 2014 in their study show Facebook being used as a curriculum tool for students learning major concepts in the courses. Students also reported feeling a sense of belonging and collaboration. Social media is used as a student-centered approach. Just 1 second. I'm of age where I have to read my notes, sorry. Social media is used as a student-centered approach to complement instruction in the classroom and to promote learning. And then we have scholars and practitioners. Scholars and practitioners from different areas are creating groups on social media to develop and support their scholarly agendas. LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube served as meeting spaces, particularly for underrepresented groups, to share their ideas, seek survey participation, instruction, and conduct research. Chung and Rupai of 2018 states Facebook to be an effective educational tool in their learning context, helping them in communication, collaboration, resource sharing, and developing their ability to use online technologies in learning. So with COVID-19 health crisis revealed an opportunity for inclusivity and global interaction with higher education students and speakers and lecturers to participate in higher education. A reliance of the internet, tablets, computers were just as impactful as the pandemic itself to highlight the technology gap. Social media became pivotal in interacting with others during the pandemic. So some psychosocial expressions, COVID tourists came in the chokery of 2020. Their research examined psychosocial expressions in using social media to provide emotional and informational support. Daughtry and Anderchek of 2014 studied 200 students in their introduction to sociology using active learning methodology. Facebook functioned in these two as a learning management system, as an instrument in student engagement collaboratively. The survey indicated students felt they belonged, more engaged with sociological concepts, theoretical perspectives, and critical thinking in their courses. The use of Facebook was clear for different purposes: enhancing learning, increasing participation and engagement, content dissemination, improving pedagogy, and information sharing. I've jumped over to Pew just to get a sense of who was actually in general participating in social media, and then keeping in mind the number, what the ages are with students. So according to the findings of the Pew Research Center of 2021, adults under 30 used Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, just opposed to adults over 30 who use YouTube and Facebook. The majority of the studies that I reviewed, all of them were based on Facebook. So about 18 to 24-year-olds reported using Instagram 76%, Snapchat 75%, TikTok 55%. 70% of 18 to 29-year-olds use Facebook. So that was some of the information I gathered to see who was actually using it. So here you'll see highlighted primarily on Facebook were women, and they were the heavier users, compared to when we look at race, it's 84% of, 74% of African Americans actually using Facebook. And again, that was a lot of what I saw in the articles that I reviewed. So that's how I saw it, compared to when we look at what social media that whites typically use is social media, but the research didn't show that researchers and clinicians, as well as instructors, were not necessarily using that. So as we go in and we look at the adults, again, how many times a day are they actually accessing Facebook, Snapchat, and Instagram? So I was doing a guest lecture on campus, so I decided just to do just to get a survey of what the students thought about using Facebook for anything related to academics, and of course they said no, nothing. But the research, like I said, the research showed otherwise, and that was just one small group. And so here I just want to go through and look at some empirical studies. You'll find that one of the studies talk about collaborative learning, two of the studies I talk about are clinical trials, and one just talks about the impact of social media. So in the first one is Andesar and Khan of 2020, used an empirical study to survey 360 undergraduate students in India. So this is a little bit more of a global approach, and when we start looking outside the United States, WhatsApp becomes the most popular app. Facebook is really minimal, but I learned things about WhatsApp that I didn't even know you could actually use. I didn't know you could use it for resource sharing and a couple other things. But the next two slides, it's really more of a little bit of a global approach to talking about how we're using social media. The students indicate the benefits easily to retrieve course content and peer interaction that increase student engagement and performance. Okay, okay, so no. The results of the study present and clearly indicated that more engaged students in collaborative learning versus social media leads to better student academic performance. So here in our first box, maybe not. This starts with.
Yeah, it's not working.
Okay, sorry. So for those online here, the first bullet point is the first study we're going to talk about is behavior intervention trials. And in that particular study, the use of social media recruited participants and intervention for clinical trials. The behavior intervention included weight loss, diabetes, and smoking cessation types of clinical trials that provided education and consulting using social media. And that to me what was really important is the way that they social media functions in these different situations. So this was just purely to recruit and get information. The authors use social media So we were talking about the behavior intervention trials, and now I have my mouse back and we can function again. The second trial is a quantitative study talking about breast cancer and smoking cessation. And so this was used primarily as a way to recruit participants over, I believe it was 16 different countries within Denmark. This study was actually done in Denmark. And they used it primarily for posting questions to have conversations back and forth between the actual participants. I'm sorry, I just saw your hand move. I thought you were saying something. Anyways, so the disadvantage was the fact that they used asynchronous texting. So it took a couple of days for people to respond to posts that were placed up there in Facebook. So here, social media impact on higher education in the particular study of Mankaya 2020. The study examined Instagram, Pinterest, Snapchat, and WhatsApp used in 46 pedagogical studies from the Middle East, Asia, and North America. Social media served as a complementary tool to a course, as opposed to a learning management system, which some of the other courses I looked at used Facebook primarily as a learning management tool. Some of the limitations through the literature review showed that there might be issues of student privacy, passive behavior, avoiding participation, student use of local languages, limited access to technology. Social media as a learning tool aligns with higher education theoretical practices, specifically student-centered learning. Several articles use learning theories in their courses designed when using social media, higher education, and social collaborative learning, cross-cultural communication to create global-minded students.
All right, so guys, this is my turn to talk a little bit about uses of social media in higher education. And so I think social media has vastly changed right over the years, especially from when I was in college and social media was just kind of coming on the scene, and Instagram, you know, we didn't really know what to do with those kinds of things. But now we have discussion boards and polls and live videos and interactive digital stickers and so much. And so social media has really just changed the way in which we communicate across the world, I think, and has brought cross-cultural communication to the forefront. It gives us the ability to communicate across communities, discovering language barriers and breaking those things down, communicating across generations, right? And geographic locations. We can now turn on one of the apps and look across the world and see what's happening. I know we had Periscope at one point in time where people can go live across the world, and so now we can have those virtual meetings and we can speak with experts online, or in a way it kind of allows us to become global citizens in a way without really having to step foot outside of our homes, in a sense. And so now we'll talk about types of social media. Facebook, maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. Facebook is one of those tools, as Elise was mentioning. Facebook is one of the widely used tools for collaborative learning. You can create those groups on Facebook, and here's our Lamar University Facebook page, of course, obviously. And so through Facebook, we have different academic departments, and so our academic departments have Facebook groups that are attached to us. And so some of those groups are open, some of them are closed, but they allow that professor to kind of take their curriculum outside of the classroom and have those discussions right there in their Facebook groups. Students can participate in those Facebook groups. And you can also have community discussions, right, with alumni. We know that Facebook, that's where our alumni are, that's where parents are, that's where faculty and staff are. And students, Facebook is kind of becoming like the new LinkedIn in a sense, right? Because we're no longer really posting personal photos, not too much. We're being very strategic. I think people are being very strategic and posting more career-related things on here, more academic things. So Facebook is just one of those tools that's becoming a little more used, I think, by the students, or students are starting to grasp that you can use it as a tool. And so that's how we use it at Lamar University with those Facebook groups. But one cool thing that I think the pandemic really brought to the forefront is those live discussions. I think Facebook has always had that ability, well, not always. Facebook in recent years, though, has had the ability to go live, but I don't think we did anything with it. Because what does that even mean, right? Going live and we're like, oh, that's live. Like once you hit that button, people will see what's happening. So I think we kind of shied away from it. But now universities and institutions or faculty members, academics are starting to use those lives to have those discussions, or maybe you're bringing an alumnus into your classroom or onto your departmental Facebook page to talk to your students about a particular topic. So Facebook Live discussions are something that is becoming more popular these days, as well as those polls. You can get on real quick and ask your students a quick question. Hey guys, what do you think about the discussion we had in class? Was it relative to the research you've been doing? And students can chime in really quickly, and you can kind of gauge how things are going. So those polls, those live discussions, those group discussions are all something that Facebook is really, really good for. And I think Facebook is one of my favorite social media platforms, just because it is kind of developing and changing, and it's not the Facebook that we used to know, where it was just for college kids. Now it's kind of changing a little more. And then Twitter. Of course, I'm sure we've all tweeted. We all know what a tweet is. We know what it looks like, right? I sure hope so. Twitter, you have 280 characters, right, to get out whatever it is that you need to say. But for Twitter, I think when it comes to research, the cool thing that we now have is hashtags. Hashtags are super, super powerful, super beneficial if used in the right way. And I think our friends from earlier talked about it when they mentioned social media through advocacy, using those hashtags to kind of find experts in your topics, using hashtags to find, and there's Dr. Bullock now. Dr. Bullock spoke on advocacy through social media earlier, but using those hashtags. Twitter is one of those things where you can get fast information, but as you mentioned earlier, Dr. Bullock, sometimes the misinformation is a little dangerous, right? So that's one of the challenges that you'll find with Twitter is misinformation, and it spreads a little quicker than the truth. So you'll have to be careful there. But Twitter, if used in the right way, is really, really beneficial when it comes to academics. There's topics that you can follow. There are links to articles and websites. And so it's one of those things where, like I said, if you're using it properly, you can get on there and do polls again with Twitter. But here's the really, really cool aspect that I think will benefit academics from bringing Twitter into the classroom. Twitter Spaces. Has anybody heard of Twitter Spaces? No? Anybody use Twitter Spaces? No? So Twitter Spaces, it allows for live audio discussions. And so if you wanted to take a discussion outside of the classroom and have it on Twitter, a faculty member, you can develop your own Twitter space, right, for English 1301, I don't know, and have your students join in on that Twitter space. And so audibly, you guys can have those group discussions and listen. You as the faculty member, as the professor, can host the academic discussion, but you can have all of your students right there joining in on that discussion about a particular topic. And so Twitter Spaces is just one of those things where I think it's a little underused right now, but Twitter Spaces can be super, super beneficial when it comes to bringing that into the classroom. And you can also invite an expert to join in on that discussion. And you can get an expert rather quickly, actually. But anyone can join into a Twitter space if you'd like. If you want to say, hey, we're having a topic on social media through advocacy, what do you guys think? And bring in those individuals into your Twitter space and have those audible discussions. And what is it? It's like Clubhouse. I know you guys have heard of Clubhouse. So Twitter Spaces is very similar to Clubhouse, but it's through the social media app. LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is probably my number one social media platform that I enjoy using, and I think that is also a little bit underused when it comes to bringing social media into the classroom. The awesome thing about LinkedIn is that you can find an expert on topics on LinkedIn. You can, I don't know if you guys can see here, but when you go to make a status, you can say, you know what, I don't want to update anyone on what I'm doing, but I do want to find an expert on this particular academic topic. And so you can search a category or search something very specific, and LinkedIn will filter through individuals who have that knowledge or who have that background, and you can be able to find an expert, ask your question very quickly, and it does find reputable individuals. So it will find those individuals, pull them in, and shoot out your question. It takes a little time, you know, for them to see it, reply back, but I think that's a really, really beneficial tool that could serve students and maybe yourselves, right, when it comes to bringing social media into the classroom. So find an expert, ask an expert. And then another thing that LinkedIn is really turning into is a visual learning guide for faculty members and students. So I'm starting to see a lot of professors, and what we found through our research is a lot of professors are starting to kind of put their lessons or their teachings on LinkedIn for anyone to kind of view, right? Or experts in general are starting to utilize LinkedIn and putting those visual guides, putting their lectures on LinkedIn. And so that's something that you can do, pull that out of the classroom and use that as a visual tool for your students outside of the classroom. If you wanted to do that, I was like, what? If you wanted to do that. And then LinkedIn also has hashtags, again, something that's always very powerful to use those hashtags. LinkedIn has polls. You can add in documents, research documents if you wanted to. You can add in any sort of guide that you wanted to, and those are right there on your profile. You can create groups on LinkedIn. So I think LinkedIn is a little bit underused, especially that find an expert feature, but the find an expert feature is really, really my favorite feature of all. And then, of course, YouTube. YouTube also is one of those tools that's a visual learning guide. If you have a student that's just quite not getting it, or if you've done your homework or your research and you see, okay, I see my students are struggling with this particular area of the curriculum, I'll tell you what, I'm going to record this lesson and put it up on YouTube for those to get it outside of the office, or I'm going to do my office hours on YouTube, if that's something you wanted to do. YouTube is very, very good for that, going live or doing those, putting those videos on there, creating collaborative communication, of course, through the comments. You can put polls on those videos, breaking down those language barriers, hashtag polls, and you can always have an expert on your YouTube channel if you so choose, which is what we do a lot at Lamar University. We always find a way to pull in alumnus from our community. We pull them in, bring them into the classrooms, which is something we always do, whether virtually, whether through YouTube, whether through Facebook. We do a lot of that at Lamar University. And we always make it to where the community can watch, but we pull in those alumni members and have them kind of give their expert opinions on something in the field, or professors will pull in questions that their students may have. And so we'll pull those questions in when we have that alumni member on for their live virtual session. We'll ask those questions and they'll get those answers, and they'll be able to further do their research, or it contributes to the curriculum or to their assignments in some kind of way. So we do a lot of pulling in experts at LU, and a lot of pulling in alumni. But did anyone have any questions on any kinds of platforms that we use? Have you guys implemented any of these platforms into your curriculum so far? So YouTube, putting any of your lessons on YouTube, or LinkedIn, asking questions or creating groups on LinkedIn, Twitter Spaces, or would you consider utilizing Twitter Spaces within your curriculum? Anybody? Sure, Dr. Bullock.
So I recently went to another conference, and there was a presentation where students were talking about how they were utilizing social media, how the students were utilizing social media. And one of the students said something really interesting about YouTube, right? That a lot of the things that they look at a lot of videos on YouTube to learn information, but they're starting to get their information on TikTok. And so what she said specifically is why she liked this particular class that integrated TikTok is because they got the information in smaller bits.
Smaller bits, yeah.
So there's all kinds of research around videos and how long they should be.
That's right.
So I just thought that was an interesting thing to hear from like a student's voice around utilizing TikTok, where it's typically seen as something fun to do, it's more and more educational purposes.
That's right, and with a lot of the younger generation, that's where they're getting their news, right? Like, I don't find a 22-year-old sitting down looking at the news like I did when I was a kid, or like my mom or my grandparents. They're getting their news from TikTok and from Twitter. And so the thing about Twitter is it's quick. Very, very quick, 280 characters, you know, it's what, 2.5 lines maybe of information. Hey, building blew up in X, Y, and Z location. It's like, oh my God, they take that, retweet it, and it's off. You know, it's off to do what it needs to do. So yeah, there is that that need to get things a lot quicker. And I know you spoke on this earlier. The attention span is a lot shorter. So a lot of those things, yeah. And that's why I say, that's why I'm really kind of focusing on lives, because the attention span, you're gonna need to be interactive a little more. You know, it's no longer putting up a PowerPoint and saying, all right, class, the PowerPoint's on YouTube, right? No, you're gonna need to be on YouTube, like, hello, hey, remember what we talked about, John, you're sleeping back there? Like, you're gonna need to be a little more interactive. So that's where those lives come in and those group discussions. And again, Twitter Spaces, that's where those, you know, some people or some students kind of retain information differently, you know, so they may not be visual learners, but maybe more auditory. So hearing those discussions may be a little beneficial. So those kinds of things, considering all of that. But that is a very good point, Dr. Bullock. But did anyone have any other questions or notice anything? Who has a question? Yes.
Since you mentioned about some of your professors do videos on YouTube and things like that, do students need to like sign in? Are these private groups? How do you take care of any sort of privacy concerns with students and faculty of proprietary information?
So one thing that we also do is like we may have a session through Zoom and it's recorded. Anytime we do something through Zoom, like a presentation or something, it is recorded for the most part. And so we put those Zoom sessions online as well. So that's one way you can kind of filter that. If you're like, look, I don't really want to put everything out there. Like I want to have the people who need to be seeing this right now in this moment and asking the questions right now. I only want those people in. So let's not go live. So to filter that out, some professors just do it through Zoom. They send out that link and we're recording that. I know during the pandemic, we did a lot of that. A lot of, hey, sign up if this is something you want to tune into. We encourage it, sign up, and you know, once it's closed, and that's it. So if that's something you kind of want to do, you can do Zoom or do Teams to record. If you're like, look, I don't know, you know, how can we kind of monitor who's going to be in there or the privacy? And again, through Facebook, like I said, you can do those closed Facebook groups, and you can still go live in those closed Facebook groups if that's something that you want to do. Or and now Twitter Spaces is a little different. You can do closed groups in Twitter Spaces, but then it gets a little more technical of, okay, you need a ticket to enter this Twitter space or something like that. You can monetize those groups, so then it gets a little bit tricky. But for the most part, those Twitter Spaces are open to the public. So considering all of that, yeah. But and then LinkedIn groups are closed or open if you choose to. So you do have those social media sites where if you want a little more privacy or to be able to filter through. How are we on time? Okay. Any other questions or maybe some hesitations about utilizing any of these platforms in the way in which we talked about today? Yes.
Like, you know, we have, you know, the videos or materials posted in our online platform, but not in the video, YouTube video. So, or not in the LinkedIn, like you mentioned. What's the benefit of posting these also YouTube materials into the LinkedIn instead of into your university?
Like a Blackboard or something like that. So with LinkedIn, I think the benefit for posting it just out there for the world to see is that the world can see it, right? I mean, you know, it allows for communication, right, from maybe other institutions. It allows for other experts to come in and chime in and say, you know what, I had that experience because this is why, and they can interact with you in the comments. It gets shared, right? So that's more exposure, that's more conversation. And that's, again, that cross communication, that cross cultural communication. You may be sharing something that someone may not have been aware of. So I think there's always a benefit when you're making something known to the world, or when you're putting a discussion out there that's not out there. Someone has to put it out there. You know what I mean? It has to be, you know. So if not you, then who? Why not?
I think that's kind of like a motivational for students too.
Mm-hmm.
They know that what they are contributing actually can be responded by the people.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah, and I think we had the student who was a graphic design major. So I think depending on you know, the major or the, you know, I know for me, working in marketing, working in public relations, it was like, no, you must put your work out there. Like, this is what we do. So you have to be able to get comfortable with doing that. So that was that kind of thing for me and myself, and when I was in school. So, you know. Any other questions, or does anybody online? Are y'all okay over there? Are y'all all right? Do they have any questions? No? Okay. Anybody have any questions out here? No? Okay. Well, I put the contact slide a little early, but I'll pass it back over to Dr. Jordan, and then at the end we'll pop this back up so y'all can scan either my contact information or hers and contact us right there. Go ahead, Dr. Jordan.
So what I had planned for us to do was some active engagement and ask you all some questions and see how you do.
I'll keep this one on here.
Yeah,
just laugh.
Yeah, I can do this. Can you all hear me in virtual world?
Yeah.
I have one of those loud voices. Shelby made me put that lapel pin on. I wasn't going to put it on. I have a voice that projects.
Oh my gosh.
Well, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Right there. This is a very sensitive thing. So I wanted to ask a couple of questions. Shelby is going to continue on with this active engagement where we're just going to ask you a couple of questions. And I guess one of the questions you might have already covered is like, how are you using social media on your campuses? Are you using social media on your campuses? So online, we want to hear from you. Are you using social media on your campuses?
I'm not working at a campus.
But wherever you work, are you using social media and how? Go ahead.
So I work for Language Learning at Babel.
You work where?
Language Learning at Babel.
Okay.
So we use, social media for everything, but we have Facebook and YouTube live sessions every Monday morning at 10 European time. So this is super interesting because students we have are there on their free will, right? They learn about English grammar, and it's super interesting what we can learn from them in these sessions.
Yeah.
So I want to share what I shared earlier with e-advocacy, but we utilize our main university has a very big following on Instagram. So anything related to what's going on, students know in real time. We are actually, I'll say within my program in social work, we are creating our Honor Society is creating a Twitter page right now, probably as we speak, I hope, to get the word out there about various activities we're doing, and also going back to e-advocacy, things that we're going to be doing as a program related to e-advocacy.
Anybody online said anything yet? We're calling on you, virtual world. No, you're laughing at me, I bet you. So one of the other things we were going to ask you is, what did you find useful about social media? So whether you use it, I guess, in your classes or in your departments or company, what do you find useful about social media?
I get to find out information, right? In real time. I need to know the information to go on social media, for good or bad.
Yeah. And you don't have to use social media in this big, huge way to make an impact. GroupMe. I've had a lot of professors say, hey, I need all of y'all. Here's what you need to do. You need to get together, get your groups together for this project, join GroupMe. And so those students do that, and we use those kinds of apps without even really thinking, we're like, no, this doesn't count. I'm just messaging. But it's organizing, it's messaging, it's planning. It's, you do all those things for GroupMe without even really considering that a big impact, but those things matter.
Yeah, I use the social media for promotional purpose. A lot of times, like we have a project about the big reading in the community, and I use the Facebook to recruit the readers in the community. You would be amazed. Majority of those who participate, we are actually they receive information through the Facebook I send out. Yeah. So a lot of people do. We also did some traditional advertisement, like through the paper and flyers, and also the variety of ways. But in the end, majority of the people receive information actually through the Facebook and LinkedIn we posting, and we also use that to call for proposals for the journals, and that also attract people from all over the world. They receive that information, and I also use that to share the information, the course-related information. Like I ask students to post their assignments in blog and also in Facebook, and so the future student, they can easily access to the previous student assignment. And they play like a role model for the future students, so that they will know the expectations from the instructor. So we found that is very beneficial for their learning. So
that's a good point.
So I came to learn more about how we can start to use social media and what we're doing. But we do use LinkedIn Learning, which is technically like it's LinkedIn, but all employees have access to LinkedIn Learning. So we're creating different ways where we can share that with them through the internal infrastructure of the organization.
That's right. Same with us. And when you send an email, it has the person's LinkedIn profile, like want to add them on LinkedIn. So social media is like being embedded into everything that we're doing. It's really, really interesting.
There's a question.
Yeah, I want to add something.
Oh, whoa! Come on, Susan.
Yeah. So I just want to share very interesting news in China right now. So there is a really huge education company called XDF. It's called Xingdongfang in China. So it's an English, it's a educational program to teach students the English. So right now they do a really interesting things that they do a live stream and they sell products. At the same time, they teach the students the English at the same time. So what I say, what I want to add to Dr.
Bull.
I want to add is that the internet give us diverse tunnels to bring all the information together, because you can imagine that there is a channel like the stream to sell the products like rice, shrimp, kind of food things, but at the same time the audiences can learn English at the same time. So the sellers are teachers too, they are English teachers too. So it's kind of really new way to bring knowledge. I think it's really interesting, and it's a lot of discussion in China right now. So the products like live stream can do this educational thing. So I think that's really interesting. Yeah.
Thank you, Susie.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So we have a consultancy. We were at the University of Oregon for 30 years, and now we have a consultancy. So we have a social media team, and it's mostly for promotion. We have a YouTube channel, and our team said, and it's related to what you all were saying, that, well, given the amount of attention span people have, you got to reduce it. So we said, all right, we're going to convert into microcapsules. We're gonna try to do
1 minute.
Right, 1 minute learning moments. So we did the first one and it took like almost 2 minutes. So the team said,
Took us about
Too
10
long.
hours to make.
I mean, it took us so long to even put it together. No, too long, get it shorter. So the second round of this, and we started with a microcapsule of make gratitude stick. And it's just a real quick, here's how you can share gratitude and somebody really believes you.
Yeah.
So we thought that would be an important place to start. So first one, no, too long, make it quicker. Second one, the fastest we could do was 1 minute and 15 seconds. Response was, you sound so hyper, like you're on speed. So no kidding, that was about a month ago. And we just sort of gave up. It's like we can't quite figure out how to make this work, even though we feel fully committed to taking our massive amount of content and putting it into these micro moments so anybody has a clue.
But we never have experimented with what you all are talking about. You know, with actually using social media as this kind of learning that you know, it's very new. Everything, I'm feeling old listening.
Well, we did a bunch of Facebook Lives where we were in different places and just kind of interacting, but not really for content, just mostly to stay connected to our community.
So
You look like you were going to say something.
Oh, no.
And everybody's like bowing down to you, so I want to hear it.
But when you were talking, it made me think, because the other part about it is you want people to come back for your content, right? So you can get your content down to a minute, but have a cliffhanger, right? So
what
you're
does
not
that
getting,
look like?
so you're not getting all the information. So you've given information in 2 minutes, so you only give a snippet the first minute. It takes, come back for more. See you next time. Right? And they'll come back if they're invested in what you're saying the first minute. So.
I'm hearing that when I focus on something broken, I want to look for the YouTube videos. And any video that is longer than 2 minutes, I will drop off. You know, I don't want the YouTube, the creators to talk too much about other things, the function, something else. I only want to straightforward to the problem I want to solve. Direct show me how to solve that instead of introducing other things. That's not the purpose I'm looking for the video. So that's exactly the shorter video. You know, you need to straightforward to the most important part and get rid of all this. Even though they're relevant, but they're not substantially important. So yeah.
Yeah, and something like TikTok could work for you, right? That hyper on speed, like that might just work.
We have promised our team we will do TikTok, which
Yes.
is
Yeah.
so unbelievable to me. I mean, I think they might have even opened an account just to be sure we don't change our mind.
Even my 6-year-old son created a TikTok. So my husband, when they asked me, is this the code number you request? I said, no. I decided to get my son because he started to create a TikTok.
For you?
No, for himself. It's the new generation. So. There's one question online actually. So Seth, is there a preference for a particular social media tool over others in higher ed? So I'm not hearing all these questions and the comments clearly.
Well, I just think that it depends on your purpose. Like the couple in the back is talking about perhaps TikTok. Researchers say they use Facebook for certain things. I was just going to say that it was depends on your purpose. What is it that you're trying to do? So some people are using Facebook for the purpose of marketing or promotion purposes, and then they're using Instagram. But it depends on what your purpose is. One of the things I talked about with research specifically in the clinical trials, they found that Facebook was strongly preferable when they were marketing their trial and they were looking for people to participate in the trials, that it went globally much faster than if they had done flyers or tried to do email or to send something out that way. So I think it depends on what is your purpose.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yes.
I'd also add, so in a previous job I had was doing recruitment on LinkedIn and on Facebook, and what would be important to note is who the community that you have on Facebook,
That's right.
if they're in the area which you're trying to recruit for.
That's
So
right.
the virtual world makes it a lot easier for it to be other locations. But for instance, like my LinkedIn was very, like where I was living, and for LinkedIn, like all of my connections there were more my professional connections. So people who I met in like while I was older and those professional connections. Like that helped me better with recruitment than my Facebook connections with all of my childhood friends. So
That's right.
it's who's on that.
Your audience is what's important.
Yes.
Yes, that is very true. And so, of course, LinkedIn is where alumni, university alumni are professionals, right? And once you graduate, you go on. And some students are starting to get on there, but for the sake of trying to get their jobs, right? Once they're headed out. On Instagram, you have current students and prospective students. They're looking, trying to see what is life like at this university. What do I have to look forward to? On Twitter, you have current students and you have faculty members and you have community members. They're in the know right now, fast information. Facebook, that's more faculty, staff, alumni, administrators of your institutions, right? And so students are starting to make their way back, but again, only for the purpose of making those connections, like a second LinkedIn. So yeah, I agree. It is important to know your audience and know, the purpose and what you're doing, what you want to do. Did you have more questions, Dr. Jordan?
Yeah.
We're at 5 minutes left, so it's okay.
Okay. And so one question, I think we already kind of talked about this, but we can address it again. Are there any social media platforms that we have talked about today that you would now consider maybe implementing into, your classrooms as it relates to what you do? And I know you guys are doing TikTok, right?
Right.
Yes,
You'll be the first to know. Yeah. And we'll have a little hook.
A little call to action is what it's called. That's right. Go ahead.
It's like the TikTok and also YouTube, they all video, related platform. Why the TikTok will be so immediately so popular? Of course, YouTube is also very popular. So
Yeah.
I don't know what the difference is. Is that like because TikTok is a short?
Well, TikTok is a lot, again, faster, right? Initially, it was 1 minute, right? It was very quick. You got 1 minute to get out whatever you want to say. Now they've extended it to 2 minutes because people are spending hours on TikTok. And the thing about TikTok is once one video ends, it scrolls on to the next without you even knowing. And then based on the algorithm, the next video, you're probably more than likely going to like what the content is because those apps, they pull in the searches that you do through Google. They're pulling in things you've looked up. They're pulling in advertisements for a dress you looked up. So it's going to be things that are tailored specifically for you. So that interest, those hours of scrolling, these students or these young individuals are looking at TikTok for hours without even realizing it. That's the crazy part. So that quickness, that constant overload of information, yeah, that's what they're after. Yeah, and some of it could be stimulation, some of that stimulation of I got to keep moving, got to keep going. So a lot of that sensory,
So I'm an instructional designer at my university, and I work in a program that it has to do with like conflict resolution, mediation, things like that. They aren't very heavily in the social medias except for like PR stuff. But I'm wondering if we could maybe use some of these platforms to better connect with the community partners, to get their students more involved in the community, to do their various group projects, like get more of the community involved in their studies to make those connections. So I really love all of your ideas. They're making me think about it. So thank you.
Yeah, I gotta think about it. I will say though, it'll be difficult for you guys to build that audience on Facebook. You know what I mean? Right now, as for businesses coming into Facebook, it's sometimes difficult to build that, but like Instagram, go right to where your audience is, those Instagram, those hashtags, and that kind of thing. So Yeah, and you can utilize the story to ask those questions, to your audience.
The story doesn't stay up long, does it?
Stays up 24 hours, and the thing about it is you can hit them with that same information on the story over and over, and people don't even realize it, and it's not a bother on the story, but on the feed, yeah.
So I do have a question. So
Yes.
the person that leads our social media team, she has so many hashtags in a given post, and I can barely handle it, but there must be a reason. I mean, it seems almost onerous.
Could there be overkill on hashtags?
I mean, yeah, sure, but in today's time, probably no. Theoretically, no. You're pulling in, when you do hashtags, or some people are using alt text. People have gotten a little creative and using alt text, which is what is used for those who may be visually impaired. It'll pull in that alt text to know what the photo is, that description. They're putting the captions and hashtags into the alt text. So it's pulling in those social media platforms, their algorithms are pulling in. If you look up, so Instagram is kind of like Google now, the search bar. So if I Googled red dress, whoever has that red dress hashtag, it's pulling in that image, or it's pulling in that video, that audio. So it's kind of like a Google search bar now. So the search, how you can search your social media, is important for those hashtags. So no one's going looking hashtag, higher ed. I can type in the word ed, and whatever has ed in it, it's pulling it in. I can type in higher. Whatever has higher, that search bar is pulling it in. So hashtags are really important in hindsight. And if you use them the right way, can be really beneficial. They can build your campaign for your business, or when you start joining the community. So those are really, really important. Overkill, maybe, but hey, gotta hang with the best of them.
Literature review on social media and learning, they did say in the Twitter, that hashtag sometimes they connect to the other famous companies in order to really expand the boundaries of their audience in other fields. And however, they did say that if you overload the hashtags, that's really distract people's attention. That's also true. They recommend that, try not to overload that, and so that information not be overburden people's attention. We didn't have the literature about that. So.
Yeah, I think we got one more question from live. So
Hi,
the question is, social media are widely used in marketing by universities, yet it seems that educators seem more hesitant to use them in their classrooms. Why is that?
So I think that would be a really good question for the audience. I know there are hesitations in using social media in the classroom, but why do maybe some of you all have hesitations in implementing social media, if you have not already? Because social media is not going anywhere. It's been around for a while. Why the hesitation in implementing that? Anybody?
I was going to ask the reverse question, actually. I mean, you've got a classroom of students, right? And so why do you move into the social realm instead of pooling their collective wisdom right then and there?
Okay, well, I mean, again, for some of the same reasons that we talked about, it's sometimes engaging outside of the classroom that keeps them there, right? I mean, for example, when you have students go on spring break, the likelihood of some of those students returning back after spring break sometimes is very tough, right? Students are like, look, I'm not going back. I've had a break, not going back. It could be the difference between you tweeting out, can't wait to see my student, taking it out. Hey guys, hope you're having a great spring break. Putting it in that group message. Hope you guys are having a great spring break. Don't forget, do your readings. You can do this. I'm looking forward to it. See you next time. Or anybody have any questions? I'm doing office hours on this day. So it's maybe kind of humanizing yourself in a sense as well, right? Instead of email, right? Again, I know Dr. Bullock talked about teaching students how to write emails. It's a real thing. Some students, I don't know how many students are emailing these days. So it's going where your audience is going and trying to connect further with those students, right?
I would also say that some of the research shows that they also use it to share information. Like some students may not like to use the learning management system of the university, so they can share information, Blackboard and Canvas. But if you want to use social media for those purposes to disseminate information, also to support the course. So whatever you're doing within the course, prior to say COVID, not all classes had a presence necessarily, say, in the learning management system for the university. You could use social media as a way to support the class by saying some of the things that Shelby said, Also to get the students engaged in having conversations that may be relevant to the class. Like if instead of doing like news, where you stand in front of the class and you give a news report from a news article, you might use social media to talk about what the current events actually are.
Trending topics.
I have respond to your question. So they showed that social media is nearly like informal communication, and the students feel like informal. It's like a play. It's like it's not like a learning assignment you posted in online or in email. You feel like that have that kind of burden in your life, and so to respond to that student question, I think, though I use social media in my courses, but some students be really against that. And one, we felt like it's maybe a technical problem because there's a lot of time for them to learn how to do that. That is the one reason. Another reason we feel like it's the privacy issues because we felt embarrassed that they post something they don't feel confident about that. But when we heard that, we post there, we are not happy about that. That's another reason we don't like that.
Right. And if faculty isn't using social media personally, it's going to be harder perhaps to convince them to answer the question. It may be harder for faculty to use social media for any purpose, encouragement, dissemination, research, or anything else, if they're not using that within their class. Thank you all for joining Shelby and I for today.